They said it was a routine traffic stop. They said he reached too fast. They said the officer feared for his life. They lied. What they didn't know was that the woman cradling her dying husband in the back seat, the one they'd dismiss as just another widow, had survived firefights in Kandahar, infiltrated terror cells in Yemen, and earned a codename whispered in the darkest corners of military intelligence Ghost 6. This is her reckoning. Stay until the end and comment what city you're watching from. Let's see how far this truth travels. The auditorium lights were still burning behind them as Camille Reigns adjusted the rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of her husband Marcus in the passenger seat. His tie was loosened, the top button of his shirt undone, that small rebellion he always allowed himself after formal events. In the back seat, their daughter's violin case rested where she'd normally sit. But tonight, Zara had gone home with her best friend's family, buzzing about the sleepover with the kind of joy only 12-year-olds could manufacture from pizza and ghost stories. "She killed it tonight," Marcus said, his voice still carrying that warm pride that had filled it during Zara's solo. "That Vivaldi piece, I had chills." Camille smiled, one hand on the wheel, the other reaching over to squeeze his knee. "She gets her talent from you. I can barely whistle on key." "Nah, she gets her discipline from you." Marcus turned to look at her, his dark eyes catching the streetlights as they passed. "That focus, that drive, that's all Camille Reigns." She didn't correct him. Didn't mention that the discipline he saw in their daughter was the same discipline that had kept her alive through 3 tours, in places Americans couldn't pronounce, doing things the government would never acknowledge. To Marcus, to Zara, to everyone in their suburban Virginia neighborhood, she was Camille Reigns, former Army logistics officer, current defense contractor, consultant, loving wife, devoted mother. Only a handful of people in the world knew about Ghost 6. The road stretched ahead of them, empty and quiet. It was past 11, and this part of Route 29 was always deserted this late. Strip malls gave way to patches of woods, streetlights becoming sparse. Marcus was scrolling through his phone, pulling up photos from the concert. "Look at this one," he said, angling the screen toward her. Zara mid-bow, her face serious and beautiful, the stage lights catching her like she was made of starlight. "That's our girl. That's our—" Blue lights exploded in the rearview mirror. Camille's heart didn't race. It never did, not anymore. Years of training had rewired her nervous system to slow down when others sped up, to think when others panicked. She checked her speedometer, 52 in a 55. Checked her registration sticker, current. Watched the police cruiser close the distance behind them. "What did I do?" she asked, more to herself than Marcus. "Probably just a tail light out," Marcus said, but she heard the change in his voice. That subtle tightening. The same tone he used when they went to visit his family in Alabama and stopped for gas in certain counties. The voice of a black man in America who knew that sometimes compliance wasn't enough. Camille pulled onto the shoulder, the gravel crunching under their tires. She put the car in park, kept her hands visible on the wheel, and waited. Behind them, the blue lights painted everything in electric shadows. "License and registration," she said quietly, more procedure than question. "Already got 'em." Marcus had pulled them from the glove compartment before she'd even finished parking. He'd learned this choreography long before he'd met her. Hands visible, documents ready, voice calm. Survive the encounter. The officer took his time approaching. Camille watched in the side mirror as he climbed out of his cruiser, white mid-40s, built like someone who'd been fit once and was fighting to maintain it. His hand rested on his gun as he walked, fingers tapping the holster in a rhythm she recognized. Nervous energy. Adrenaline seeking an outlet. Bad sign. He stopped at Marcus's window, shining his flashlight directly into her husband's face. Not at the documents Marcus held up. Not at the vehicle registration. Into his eyes. "Evening," the officer said. His badge read, "Halverson." "Know why I stopped you?" "No, sir." Marcus replied, his voice that careful neutral that broke Camille's heart every time she heard it. Her husband, who could debate philosophy, quote Langston Hughes, fix any engine, and make their daughter laugh until she couldn't breathe, reduced to careful monosyllables. Your tail light's out, left side. I'll get that fixed first thing tomorrow, officer. Here's my... Step out of the vehicle. Camille felt something cold slide down her spine. Officer, is that necessary? We have our documentation right here. Halverson's flashlight swung to her face, blinding. Ma'am, I need you to be quiet while I'm addressing the driver. Every instinct she'd honed over 15 years of military service was screaming. The way he positioned himself, the tension in his shoulders, the fact that his partner, she could see another officer in the cruiser, hadn't gotten out. This wasn't protocol, this was escalation. Sir, Marcus said, his hands still raised with the documents. I'm happy to step out, but I want to let you know I'm going to unbuckle my seatbelt first. I didn't ask for a narration. Out. Now. Marcus looked at Camille. In that glance, she saw everything, his fear, his love, his desperate need to get home to their daughter. She gave him the smallest nod. Comply. De-escalate. Survive. He opened the door slowly, keeping his hands visible. The documents fluttered to his lap. Hands, where I can see them. Halverson barked, his hand now gripping his weapon. They are, officer, I'm just... Get your hands up now. Camille was already moving her hand, reaching for her door handle, her mouth opening to identify herself, to de-escalate, to use the voice that had talked down armed insurgents and negotiated hostage releases. Marcus bent slightly, reaching for the fallen documents on his lap. License, registration, the insurance card with their smiling family photo in the corner. The gunshot was impossibly loud in the quiet night. Then another. Then silence. Time fragmented. Camille heard herself screaming a sound she'd never made, not in Fallujah, not in Mosul, not in the black site outside Kabul, where she'd been held for 72 hours. She was out of the car, stumbling, her legs foreign and untrustworthy. Marcus was on the ground. Shots fired. Shots fired. Suspect reached for a weapon. Halverson was yelling into his radio, his gun still trained on Marcus's body. He reached for his wallet. Camille heard her voice, shrill and breaking. He was getting his license. You told him to. Ma'am, get back in your vehicle. She dropped to her knees beside Marcus. His eyes were open, confused, like he was trying to solve a problem he couldn't quite see. 2 holes in his chest, dark and spreading. Her hands went to the wounds, automatically, pressure elevation, airway, combat medic training taking over, even as her mind shattered. Marcus, baby, stay with me. Stay with me. His lips moved. She bent close. Zara? She's safe. She's at Sarah's house. She's safe, baby. You're going to be fine. Help is coming. But she could feel his heartbeat under her hands weakening. Could see the light changing in his eyes. She'd seen this before, in soldiers, in civilians, in targets and teammates alike. The body's surrender. The moment when staying became harder than leaving. No, she whispered. No, no, no. Marcus, don't. Don't leave me. Don't leave Zara. We need you. I need you. Please. His hand found hers, slippery with blood. He squeezed once, weak but deliberate, then nothing. Sir, you need to step back. Another officer had arrived, younger Asian, his badge reading Kim. He was trying to pull her away, but she wouldn't move. Couldn't move, her hands still pressed to Marcus's chest, even though the blood had stopped pumping. Even though she knew. He's gone, Kim said, softer now. Ma'am, I'm so sorry, but we need to secure the scene. Camille looked up at him. At Halverson, who was already crafting his story into his radio. At the flashing lights that kept coming, painting her dead husband in blue and red. At the documents scattered on the ground, Marcus's license, showing his smile, the photo taken at the DMV 3 months ago, when he'd joked about needing a haircut. Something in her chest cracked. Not her heart that would come later. This was something else. The wall between Camille Reigns, wife-mother, suburban professional, and Ghost 6, the operative who'd survived 6 assassination attempts and eliminated 17 high-value targets. "Ma'am," Kim said again, his hand gentle on her shoulder. "We need to get you checked out. Are you injured?" She looked down at herself, covered in Marcus's blood. But no, not injured. Not physically. "I need to call my daughter," she heard herself say. Her voice sounded strange, distant, controlled. "We'll need to take your statement first. My daughter is 12 years old, and her father just died in front of me. I need to call her before she sees this on the fucking news." Kim flinched, stepped back. I'll get you a phone." Camille stood her legs steady now. She looked at Halverson, who was still talking into his radio, his back to her. Looked at the cruiser where his partner was finally emerging, camera in hand. Looked at the place where her husband's blood was soaking into the Virginia soil. "Remember this," she told herself. "Every detail, every face, every word. You're going to need it." They took her to the station in a separate car. Not under arrest, they assured her. Just procedure. They needed her statement, needed to understand what happened. What happened was murder, but Camille didn't say that. Not yet. The interview room was exactly what she expected: cinder block walls, fluorescent lights, a metal table bolted to the floor. They'd given her wet wipes to clean the blood off her hands, but it had dried under her nails in the creases of her palms. Marcus reduced to stains. Detective Sarah Brennan White, early 50s, with kind eyes that Camille didn't trust, sat across from her with a recorder. "Mrs. Reigns, I know this is incredibly difficult, but I need to walk through what happened tonight. Can you do that for me?" Camille took a breath. "We were driving home from our daughter's school concert. Officer Halverson pulled us over. He said our taillight was out. He asked my husband to step out of the vehicle. My husband complied. He reached for his license and registration, which had fallen to his lap. Officer Halverson shot him twice in the chest. My husband died on the side of the road at approximately 11:47 p.m. Brennan wrote carefully, her face neutral. "Did your husband make any threatening movements?" He reached for his wallet. "But could it have appeared threatening to the officer?" Camille looked at her, really looked. Saw the careful phrasing, the leading question, the narrative already forming. "My husband was a 6'2" black man reaching for something in his lap. I imagine to Officer Halverson breathing was threatening enough." Brennan's pen paused. "Mrs. Reigns, I understand you're upset." "My husband is dead." "Yes, and I'm very sorry for your loss. But I need you to understand that Officer Halverson will say he feared for his life, that in the darkness, he couldn't see what your husband was reaching for, that he gave clear commands that weren't followed. He gave contradictory commands. He told Marcus to get his hands up, then asked for documentation. When Marcus reached for the documents he'd been holding when Halverson first approached, Halverson shot him. Did you see Officer Halverson before he fired? His positioning, his demeanor. I saw a man with his hand on his weapon before Marcus even opened the car door. I saw escalation, not de-escalation. I saw a man looking for a reason." Brennan set down her pen, leaned back. "Mrs. Reigns, what do you do for a living?" The question was meant to catch her off guard. Camille almost smiled. "I'm a consultant for defense contractors. I analyze threat assessments and security protocols." "So you're trained in reading situations?" "You could say that. And in this situation, from inside your vehicle in the dark, you were able to assess Officer Halverson's intent." "I was able to see my husband follow every command given to him, and I was able to see him die for it." They went in circles for another hour. Brennan asking the same questions different ways. Camille giving the same answers. Finally, they let her go, with the promise that they'd be in touch, that the investigation was ongoing, that these things took time. Camille walked out of the station at 3 a.m. to find Marcus's brother David waiting in the parking lot. One look at his face, so much like Marcus's, devastated and trying not to show it, and the wall cracked again. I told Zara you were at the hospital. David said, his voice rough. Didn't know what else to say. She's at our place with Mom. I need to get to her. Cam? David's hands twisted the car keys. What the fuck happened out there? They killed him, David. That officer pulled us over and killed your brother for being black in the wrong place. What are they saying? That he reached for something. That Halverson feared for his life. That it's all under investigation. She looked back at the station at the lights still burning in the windows. They're going to bury this. Call it justified. Give Halverson a few weeks of desk duty, and then put him back on the streets. Like hell they will. David's voice shook with rage. We're going to sue. We're going to get lawyers, go to the media. We're going to do all of that, Camille said quietly. But first, I need to tell my daughter that her father is never coming home. The drive to David's house took 20 minutes. Camille spent it staring out the window, watching the same streets she and Marcus had driven together for years. They'd bought their house on Maple Avenue 5 years ago, proud of the good schools, the diverse neighborhood, the sense of safety. What a fucking joke. Zara was awake when they arrived, sitting on the couch between David's wife Andrea and Marcus's mother Ruth. The moment she saw Camille, she knew. No, Zara said, standing. No, Mom. No. Camille caught her daughter as she collapsed, both of them sinking to the floor. Zara's screams filled the house, raw, primal sounds that no 12-year-old should have to make. Camille held her, rocked her, whispered things that meant nothing, because what could you say? What words existed for this? Ruth knelt beside them, her hands shaking as she touched Zara's hair. My boy, she kept saying. My beautiful boy. David had turned away his shoulders, heaving with silent sobs. Andrea stood, frozen, tears streaming down her face. They stayed like that until dawn, a family shattered, trying to hold the pieces together. 3 days later, Camille stood in her bathroom at 5 a.m., staring at her reflection. She hadn't slept, hadn't eaten more than what Zara needed to see her consume. The woman in the mirror looked like a stranger, eyes hollow, skin gray, wearing Marcus's old college sweatshirt because it still smelled like him. You're not just a widow, she told her reflection. You're Ghost 6. Act like it. She'd spent the last 72 hours doing what the civilian world expected, crying, accepting casseroles, planning a funeral she couldn't afford to think about yet. But in the stolen moments when Zara finally slept, when the visitors left, she'd been doing something else. Researching. Officer Brent Halverson, 43. 15 years on the force. 3 excessive force complaints, all dismissed. 2 suspicious shootings, both ruled justified. Member of the Fraternal Order of Police. Regular contributor to the police union's legal defense fund. And a social media presence that told the real story. Camille had found his Facebook account, not the public one, but the private one he thought was locked down. She'd learned hacking from the best NSA had to offer. His password was his badge number and his daughter's birthday. Amateur hour. The posts were a roadmap of radicalization. Blue Lives Matter memes, jokes about urban neighborhoods, a shared video titled How to Spot a Threat that was just thinly veiled racism dressed as officer safety training. Comments on news articles about police shootings that always blamed the victim. And one post from 2 months ago that made her blood run cold. Hesitation kills. When they reach you, shoot. Let the lawyers sort it out later. You go home to your family. That's what matters. 17 people had liked it. 4 were fellow officers. Camille screenshotted everything, downloaded it to 3 separate drives, encrypted and uploaded to a secure server she'd maintained since her military days. Evidence. Her phone buzzed. A text from Detective Brennan. Need to schedule a follow-up interview. When are you available? Camille typed back. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. What she didn't type. I'm done being the grieving widow you can patronize. Now comes the reckoning. She opened her laptop and composed an email to a name most people wouldn't recognize. Catherine Park, Deputy Director of the FBI's Civil Rights Division. Catherine had been her handler during a joint operation in Syria, one of the few people who knew about Ghost 6. Catherine: I need a favor. Actually, I need justice. I'm attaching documentation regarding the death of Marcus Reigns, my husband, who was killed by Officer Brent Halverson of the Fairfax County Police Department on October 5th. I'm also attaching evidence of Officer Halverson's history and online activity. I know how these things usually go. I know the system is designed to protect its own. But I'm not just a widow. I'm the operative you trusted in Damascus. I'm the one who doesn't quit. And I'm asking you to remember that. The civilian footage exists. I know it does. There's a house at the intersection where we were stopped, and I saw the camera. Help me get it before it disappears. See. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Downstairs, she heard Zara crying in her sleep, a sound that had become the soundtrack of their new normal. Camille went to her daughter's room, climbed into bed beside her, and held her until the nightmare passed. "Mom," Zara whispered in the darkness. "Is Daddy really gone?" Every time she asked, it broke Camille again. But she'd learned in the military that you could function while broken. You just had to compartmentalize. "Yeah, baby, he is." The news said, they said Daddy was dangerous, that the police officer was scared. Camille's jaw clenched. She'd tried to keep Zara away from the news, but of course it had found her. The narrative was already spreading. Armed suspect reached for weapon. Officer forced to fire. Investigation ongoing. "Your father," Camille said carefully, "was the least dangerous person I've ever known. He was gentle and kind, and he loved you more than anything in the world. What happened to him wasn't his fault. Do you understand me? It wasn't his fault." Then whose fault was it? People who were supposed to protect us, people who failed. Are they going to jail? God, the innocence in that question. The belief that justice was a thing that actually existed. I don't know, baby, but I'm going to make sure the truth comes out. I promise you that. Zara was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Mom, are you scared?" Camille thought about the question. Thought about the firefights she'd survived, the torture she'd endured, the moments when death had been a breath away. She'd never been scared then. She'd been trained, prepared, in control. This was different. This was her daughter's future, her husband's memory, her own soul on the line. "Yeah," she admitted. "I'm terrified, but being scared doesn't mean we stop fighting. Your dad taught me that." He did. Every day. He faced a world that was scared of him just for existing, and he still chose to be kind. That's real bravery. Zara pressed closer. "I miss him so much." "Me too, baby. Me too." As Zara finally drifted back to sleep, Camille stared at the ceiling and let herself for just a moment be only Camille Reigns. Not Ghost 6. Not the operative. Just a woman who'd lost the love of her life to a system that valued some lives over others. Then she got up, went back to her computer, and continued building her case. Because Brent Halverson had made a mistake. He'd killed a black man and expected it to be business as usual. What he didn't know was that he'd killed Ghost 6's husband. And Ghost 6 never left a mission unfinished. The follow-up interview room was the same as before, but this time, Detective Brennan brought company. Lieutenant Frank Morris sat beside her, a man whose gut strained against his uniform shirt and whose eyes held the cold calculation of someone who'd spent 30 years learning how to make problems disappear. "Mrs. Reigns," Morris began, not bothering with condolences. "We've reviewed the body cam footage from Officer Halverson." Camille's pulse didn't quicken. And it corroborates his account. Your husband was asked to show his hands. He reached toward his waistband. Officer Halverson, in fear for his life, discharged his weapon. The lie was so smooth, so practiced. Camille wondered how many times Morris had delivered variations of it. How many families had sat in this same chair and been fed the same poison? That's not what happened. Brennan leaned forward, her voice taking on that false sympathy Camille had learned to recognize. Mrs. Reigns, I know grief can affect memory. It's traumatic being in that situation. My memory is perfect. Camille kept her voice level, professional. My husband was reaching for his license and registration, which had fallen to his lap when Officer Halverson ordered him out of the vehicle. There was no reaching toward a waistband. There was no weapon. There was a wallet with our family photo in it. Morris pulled out a tablet, turned it toward her. The body cam footage played in grainy nighttime quality. But even through the poor resolution, Camille could see it had been edited. The timestamp jumped just 2 seconds, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. 2 seconds where Marcus's hands went from holding documents to appearing to reach down. Officer Halverson gave multiple commands. Morris said, his voice flat. Your husband failed to comply. Your officer gave contradictory commands. Ask for documentation, then demand hands up. It's a setup. You train them to do this. The temperature in the room dropped. Morris's face hardened. That's a serious accusation. It's the truth. Brennan touched Morris's arm gently, playing good cop. Camille. May I call you Camille? I understand you're angry. You have every right to be. But making wild accusations isn't going to help anyone. It certainly won't bring your husband back. The casual use of her first name, the patronizing tone, Camille recognized the tactic. Make her emotional, make her seem unstable, discredit anything she might say later. I want to file a formal complaint with Internal Affairs, Camille said. Morris actually smiled. Of course, that's your right. Detective Brennan can give you the paperwork on your way out. I also want the name of the officer who was in the cruiser with Halverson, Officer Kim. Officer Kim wasn't in the cruiser, Morris said. He arrived after the incident. First responder. There was another officer in Halverson's vehicle. I saw him. Body cam footage shows Officer Halverson was alone. Morris stood signaling the interview was over. Mrs. Reigns. I'm very sorry for your loss, truly. But this was a clean shoot. The investigation will reflect that. I'd advise you to focus on your family, on healing. Take care of your daughter. Let us do our jobs. Camille stood slowly, meeting his eyes. Oh, I intend to let you do your jobs, Lieutenant. I'm just going to make sure you do them correctly this time. She saw the flicker of irritation cross his face before he masked it. Good. Let him underestimate her. Let them all think she was just another grieving widow who'd cry herself out and eventually accept whatever narrative they fed her. On her way out, Brennan handed her a single sheet of paper. The complaint form. You can mail it in or drop it off. Camille took it, noting how thin it was, how unofficial. What's the timeline on internal affairs investigations? These things take time. Could be months. Months. We're thorough. You wouldn't want us to rush to judgment, would you? The dig was subtle but clear. You're rushing to judgment. We're the professionals. Camille folded the paper and put it in her purse. Thank you for your time, Detective. Outside, the October air was crisp, carrying the smell of dying leaves. Camille sat in her car in the parking lot and allowed herself 30 seconds of pure rage. Fists clenched, jaw tight, breathing hard. Then she pulled out her phone. The email from Catherine Park had arrived that morning. Call me. Secure line. Camille dialed the number from memory, one she hadn't used in 3 years since her last Ghost 6 operation had officially ended. Catherine answered on the first ring. I saw the news. Jesus, Cam. I'm so sorry. I need your help, Kat. Anything. What do you need? There's footage. Civilian footage. A house on the corner of Route 29 and Maple Grove Road has a security camera pointed at the street. I need that footage before it disappears. There was a pause. You think they'd destroy evidence? I think they've already edited the body cam. I need something they can't touch. Catherine was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had changed no longer. Friend, now federal agent. I can't officially get involved in a local police matter without cause. But unofficially, I can make a call. See if the homeowner would be willing to cooperate with a federal civil rights investigation. There's a federal investigation. There will be. I'm putting the file together now. But Cam, you need to understand these cases are hard. Even with evidence, even with clear misconduct, the legal standard for convicting a police officer is incredibly high. I know the odds. Do you? Because I've seen good cases fall apart. I've seen clear video evidence get explained away by expert witnesses who talk about split-second decisions and reasonable fear. I've seen juries acquit because they can't imagine a world where police officers murder people. Camille watched a patrol car pull into the station lot, the officers inside laughing about something. Then I'll make them imagine it. How? I haven't figured that out yet, but I will. Catherine sighed. I'll get you that footage. Give me 48 hours. And Cam, be careful. If they think you're becoming a problem, they'll make your life hell. Harassment, intimidation. Suddenly, you're getting pulled over every week. Child Protective Services gets anonymous calls about your daughter. Let them try. After they hung up, Camille sat in the parking lot for another 20 minutes watching officers come and go. Some of them glanced at her car, but no one approached. She was already invisible to them, just another grieving widow who'd eventually fade away. Her phone rang. David. Hey, she answered. Where are you? Mom's worried. Zara's asking for you. I'm on my way. Had to meet with the detectives. And they're going to call it justified. Clean shoot. Marcus reached for something officer feared for his life, case closed. David's breathing turned ragged. Those fucking... David, I need you to stay calm. For your mom, for Zara. Can you do that? How are you so calm? They're going to let him walk, Cam. That piece of shit is going to walk. No, Camille said quietly. He's not. But I need you to trust me and stay out of the way. Can you do that? There was a long pause. What are you planning? Nothing illegal. That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give you right now. Tell Zara I'll be home in 30 minutes. Tell her to pick a movie, something funny. We're going to have dinner together and pretend to be normal for 2 hours. After she hung up, Camille started the car but didn't drive immediately. Instead, she pulled up Google Maps and entered the address she'd memorized, 4127 Maple Grove Road, the house on the corner. Street view showed a modest colonial with a clear view of the intersection, and there, visible in the image, was the camera. She drove past the house on her way home, slowing just enough to confirm. The camera was still there, mounted under the eave, pointing exactly where she needed it to point. A woman was in the front yard raking leaves. Early 60s white, wearing a Washington National sweatshirt. Camille committed her face to memory. When she got home, Zara was waiting by the door. She'd changed out of the black dress she'd been wearing all week, and into one of Marcus's old t-shirts so large it hung to her knees. Can we watch The Princess Bride? Zara asked. Daddy always said it was the perfect movie. Camille pulled her daughter close. Yeah, baby, that's perfect. They made it through half the movie before Zara fell asleep on the couch, her head in Camille's lap. Ruth and Andrea had gone home, finally accepting that Camille needed some space. David had stayed sitting in Marcus's favorite chair, staring at nothing. You should go home, Camille told him quietly. Get some sleep. Can't sleep. He looked at her. Keep seeing him. Keep hearing Mom scream when we told her. Keep thinking about all the things I should have said to him. He knew you loved him. Did he know I was proud of him? Because I was. Every damn day. My little brother, the mechanical engineer. The guy who could fix anything. The best father I ever saw. His voice broke. Did he know? He knew. David wiped his eyes. What you said earlier about me staying out of the way. You're scaring me, Cam. Don't be scared. Be patient. Patient. They killed my brother. And you want me to be patient? I want you to trust that I know what I'm doing. She kept her voice low, aware of Zara sleeping. In another life, I did things that would surprise you. Things Marcus never knew about because they were classified. I'm good at what I do, David, and what I do right now is get justice for your brother." He studied her face. "Andrea always said there was something about you. Something that didn't quite fit the defense contractor consultant story. She said you moved like military but wrong somehow. Too precise, too aware. Andrea's perceptive. So it's true you were more than logistics. I was a lot of things. None of them matter now except what they taught me." She shifted, careful not to wake Zara. "I need you to do something for me. Talk to Marcus's friends from work. Find out if anyone saw him the day he died, what his mood was like, what he talked about. Build me a timeline." Why? Because they're going to try to paint him as aggressive as threatening. They'll dig up anything they can use, a fight in high school, a noise complaint, anything to make him seem dangerous. I need character witnesses who can testify otherwise. David nodded slowly. "I can do that. And David, when you talk to people, you're gathering information for the funeral. Nothing about legal action, nothing about investigations, just memories of Marcus. Can you do that? You think they're watching?" "I think they're smart enough to know that most families sue. They'll be preparing defenses, looking for leverage. I don't want them to know what we're really doing until it's too late." After David left, Camille carried Zara to bed and tucked her in. Her daughter stirred, mumbled something about daddy, and then settled. Camille stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching her sleep, feeling the weight of every decision she was about to make. Then she went to the basement. The storage unit was hidden behind a false panel Marcus had helped her install when they'd bought the house. He'd thought it was for important documents, valuables. He'd never asked why it needed a biometric lock. Camille pressed her thumb to the scanner. The panel slid open. Inside were things from another life. Encrypted hard drives with classified mission reports, fake passports, cash in multiple currencies, a burner phone system, and wrapped in oilcloth, her service weapon, a Sig Sauer P226 she'd carried through 3 tours. She didn't touch the gun. Not yet. That wasn't what this war required. Instead, she pulled out a laptop she'd last used in Kabul, booted it up, and logged into networks that technically didn't exist. The dark web had plenty of people who could help with what she needed, but Camille didn't trust strangers. She needed someone from the old days. The encrypted message went to a handle she hadn't contacted in 4 years, Cypher Ghost. Need tech support, digital forensics and counter-surveillance. Name your price. G6. The reply came in less than 2 minutes. Holy shit, you're alive. Thought you'd gone full civilian. What's the op personal? My husband was killed by a cop. I need to prove it was murder. A longer pause this time. Then, fuck, I'm sorry. What do you need? Body cam footage analysis. They've edited it. I need to prove the timestamp manipulation. Also need deep background on the officer. Social media financials. Anything dirty. Officer's name, Brent Halverson. Fairfax County PD. Give me 24 hours. And G6, no charge. This one's on the house. Camille closed the laptop and sat in the silence of her basement, surrounded by ghosts of her former self. She'd thought that life was over. Thought she'd successfully transitioned to suburban normalcy, to PTA meetings and family dinners, and the quiet joy of watching Zara grow up. But violence had found her anyway. Had reached into her safe civilian life and ripped out her heart. The next morning, Camille drove to 4127 Maple Grove Road. The woman from the yard was outside again, this time watering plants that were probably already dead, October having turned everything brown. Camille parked and approached slowly, non-threatening. "Excuse me, I'm sorry to bother you." The woman turned wariness in her eyes that softened when she saw Camille's face, puffy from crying, exhausted, unthreatening. "Can I help you?" "My name is Camille Reigns. My husband was killed last week. Right there." She pointed to the intersection. "I saw your camera and I was hoping—" "Oh my God!" The woman's hand went to her mouth. "I saw it on the news. The traffic stop. I'm so sorry." "Thank you." I know this is a lot to ask, but does your camera record? Did it capture what happened? The woman glanced back at her house, uncomfortable. It does record, but I haven't looked. I didn't even think. Would you be willing to check? Please. The police are saying my husband reached for a weapon, but he didn't. He was reaching for his wallet. I need proof. The police came by yesterday, the woman said quietly. 2 officers. They asked about the camera. Said it was part of their investigation. I gave them the footage. Camille's heart sank. You gave them the original files? I emailed them. They said they'd return it when the investigation was complete. Did you keep a copy? The woman hesitated. My husband did. He doesn't trust the cloud keeps everything on an external hard drive. He's weird about stuff like that. She paused. I'm not supposed to tell anyone. The officers said the footage was evidence in an ongoing investigation. That I could be charged with obstruction if I shared it. They're lying to you, Camille said, and watched the woman flinch. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be aggressive. But they're using legal language to scare you into silence. You own that footage. It was recorded on your property. They need a warrant to compel you to keep it private. Are you a lawyer? No. But I know enough. Camille took a breath. Look, I understand if you don't want to get involved. I really do. But my daughter is 12 years old, and she watched her father die for nothing. If that footage shows what really happened, it could save the next family. The next father. Please. The woman's eyes filled with tears. Come inside. My husband's at work, but I know where he keeps the drive. The house smelled like coffee and cinnamon. Family photos covered the walls. Kids, grandkids, a golden retriever. The American dream preserved behind glass. The woman, she introduced herself as Patricia, led Camille to a home office and pulled an external hard drive from a desk drawer. He labels everything. October 5th should be here. She clicked through folders until she found the file. Do you want to watch it? Yes, Camille said, though every cell in her body screamed no. Patricia queued up the video and stepped back, giving Camille space. The footage was crystal clear, high-definition color camera with night vision. It showed their car pulling over, showed Halverson approaching, showed Marcus stepping out with his hands raised, documents visible. Showed Halverson barking orders, saw Marcus reaching down not toward his waist, but toward his lap where the papers had fallen. Then the flash of the gun. Once. Twice. Saw Marcus fall. Saw Camille scrambling from the car. Saw Halverson's face, not afraid, not panicked, satisfied. Patricia was crying openly. Oh God, he murdered him. That officer just murdered your husband. Camille couldn't speak. Seeing it from this angle without the chaos of being there made it worse somehow. Made it real in a way her memory couldn't capture. Marcus had done everything right. Everything. And it hadn't mattered. Can I have a copy? She managed. Take the whole drive. I'll tell my husband I lost it. He'll be mad, but he'll get over it. Patricia pulled a USB cable from the desk. Do you have something to transfer it to? Camille pulled out a flash drive from her purse. She'd come prepared. This should work. While the file transferred, Patricia brought her water. What are you going to do with it? Whatever I have to. Will it be enough to convict him? I don't know, but it's a start. The file transfer completed. Camille pocketed the drive and stood. Thank you. You didn't have to do this. Yes, I did. Patricia walked her to the door. My son is a police officer in Baltimore. He's a good man, does the job right. But men like that officer, they make it dangerous for people like my son. They make people hate all police because they abuse the uniform. She touched Camille's arm. Get him. Make him pay. I will. That night, after Zara was asleep, Camille sat in her basement and watched the footage 17 times. Studied every frame, every detail. Counted the seconds between Halverson's commands and his shots. Analyzed his body language, his positioning, the way his partner. Yes, there was a partner briefly visible in the cruiser had stayed in the car. This wasn't a split-second decision. This was execution. Her encrypted laptop chimed. Message from Cipher Ghost. Found your smoking gun. Halverson's got a burner Facebook account. Real gem. Posts about cleaning up the streets. Shares Proud Boys content. Comments on police shooting articles with shit like "one less thug." Got screenshots of everything before he could delete. Also, his department psych eval from 2018 recommended counseling for aggressive tendencies. Recommendation was ignored. Want me to dig deeper? Camille typed back financials. Does he have gambling debts? Drinking problem, anything that shows instability? On it. Also check the body cam metadata. You were right. Timestamp's been altered. It's good work but not perfect. I can prove the manipulation in court if needed. How fast can you compile all of this into a report? Depends. Official or unofficial? Official enough to submit to the FBI. Then I'll need to launder my methods. Probably 72 hours. Make it 48. Clock's ticking. The next day, Camille dropped Zara at school and drove to Marcus's workplace, an engineering firm in Arlington. His boss, Raymond Chen, met her in the parking lot with red eyes and a tight hug. How are you holding up? He asked. Surviving. Can we talk? Raymond led her to his office, closed the door. What do you need? Character witnesses. People who knew Marcus worked with him can testify to who he was. Testify. You're filing a lawsuit. Eventually. Right now I'm building a case. The police are saying Marcus was aggressive, that the officer feared for his life. I need people who can stand up and say that's bullshit. Raymond nodded slowly. Everyone here would do it. Marcus was... His voice cracked. He was the guy everyone wanted on their team. Patient, brilliant, kind. Never raised his voice, never had a bad word about anyone. We used to joke that he was too nice to be an engineer. Did he seem upset about anything lately? Stressed, angry? Are you kidding? He was over the moon. Zara's concert was all he talked about for weeks. And you guys had just booked that trip to Disney World for Christmas, right? He showed me the resort photos at least 5 times. Raymond's hands clenched. He was happy, Cam. Deeply, genuinely happy. There was nothing threatening about him. I need you to document that. Write it down, dates and specifics. Get others to do the same. Done. Anything else? Yeah. Did Marcus mention being followed? Pulled over before any run-ins with police? Raymond frowned. Not that he told me. Why? Because I need to know if Halverson targeted him specifically, or if this was random. You think it was personal? I think Halverson has a history of excessive force against black men. I think Marcus was in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong skin color. She stood. Get me those statements, Raymond, and thank you. That evening, Catherine Park called. I got the footage, Catherine said. The homeowner cooperated. It's devastating, Cam. Clear as day. This wasn't a justified shooting. Can you use it? I'm opening an official civil rights investigation. FBI's going to come and interview witnesses, review everything. But I need you to understand something. This doesn't mean prosecution. The standard for federal civil rights violations is incredibly high. We need to prove Halverson willfully violated Marcus's constitutional rights with malicious intent. The video shows intent. It shows what happened. Intent is harder. His lawyer will argue split-second decision, reasonable fear training protocols. We need more. I have more. Background on Halverson, evidence of bias proof. The body cam was edited. I'm compiling everything. Catherine paused. Cam, where are you getting this information? Does it matter? If it's not obtained legally? It's legal enough. And it's true. That's what matters. Truth and admissible evidence aren't always the same thing. Then make it admissible. You're FBI. You have resources I don't. Catherine sighed. Send me what you have. I'll see what we can use. But Cam, promise me you're being careful. Promise me you're not doing anything that could jeopardize the case. I promise I'm doing whatever it takes to get justice for my husband." After they hung up, Camille compiled everything into a secure file. The civilian footage, the body cam analysis, Halverson's social media history, his psychological evaluation, witness statements from Marcus's colleagues, a timeline of the night he died, financial records showing they were a stable family with no history of violence or criminal activity. It was a case that should have been slam dunk. But Camille knew better. She'd seen too much done, too much to trust the system to work the way it was supposed to. She needed more, needed something that would make prosecution unavoidable, that would put so much public pressure on the department that they couldn't sweep this under the rug. The answer came from an unexpected source. Officer Kim, the young officer who'd arrived first, who'd tried to pull her away from Marcus's body, reached out through David, left a message saying he wanted to talk off the record. They met at a diner 40 miles outside Fairfax County, far enough that no one would recognize them. Kim looked worse than Camille felt. Dark circles shaking hands, the weight of guilt written across his face. "I can't do this anymore," he said before she'd even sat down. "I can't sleep, can't eat. I see your husband every time I close my eyes." Camille slid into the booth across from him. "Then help me. If I testify against Halverson, my career is over. You understand that the blue wall, the union, the brotherhood, it's real. They'll destroy me. They already destroyed my family, so forgive me if I don't care about your career." Kim flinched but didn't argue. "You're right. I'm sorry. I need you to know what I'm risking. Tell me what happened that night. The truth." He took a shaky breath. "I wasn't first on scene. I was there. In Halverson's cruiser. We were partners that night." Camille's blood went cold. "You saw the whole thing. I tried to stop him. When he pulled you over, I asked why. He said something about teaching respect. I thought he meant a ticket, maybe a warning. When your husband got out of the car, I saw he was complying, being polite. I told Halverson to easy that it was just a tail light. He told me to shut the fuck up and stay in the car." "Why did you?" "Because I'm a coward." Kim's eyes filled with tears. "I'm a 26-year-old rookie, and Halverson's been on the force for 15 years. When he told me to stay put, I stayed. And then he shot your husband, and I heard myself radioing it in as first responder because that's what Halverson told me to say. I helped him cover it up before I'd even processed what happened." The body cam footage, edited by the department's tech guy, Morris ordered it, said it was to clarify the sequence of events, but really it was to hide that your husband never reached for anything threatening. They cut the part where Halverson was clearly the aggressor. Camille leaned forward. "Will you testify to this officially? If I do, they'll say I'm lying, that I'm trying to save my own ass. Halverson's already building the narrative, said I was too green to remember correctly, that the stress confused me. Morris is backing him up. I have the civilian footage. It proves your story." Kim looked up, hope flickering. "You do, boo. Crystal clear, shows everything. Shows Halverson murdering my husband in cold blood. With your testimony and that footage, we can win this. They'll come after me. They'll come after both of us. Difference is, I know how to fight back. Do you?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "What do you need me to do?" "I need you to make an official statement to the FBI. Agent Catherine Park is running the investigation. I'll give you her contact information. Tell her everything you just told me. And then? And then you do what you should have done that night. You stand up for what's right. Consequences be damned." Kim nodded, slowly pulled out his phone. "Give me the number." As Camille watched him dial, she felt something shift inside her chest. The grief was still there, would probably always be there. But beside it now was something else. Something sharper, more focused. Hope. Not hope that the system would work. Hope that she could force it to. Ghost 6 was operational again. And this time the mission was personal. Officer Kim's statement to the FBI landed like a grenade in Fairfax County's carefully constructed narrative. Within 48 hours, Lieutenant Morris was calling emergency meetings. Within 72, the police union had hired 3 additional lawyers. Within a week, local news had picked up the story. And suddenly, Marcus Reigns wasn't just another statistic. He was a name, a face, a father, whose daughter's violin concert photo went viral alongside the hashtag that Camille hadn't created, but now couldn't escape, #JusticeForMarcus. The attention brought pressure. The pressure brought mistakes. And mistakes were exactly what Camille had been waiting for. She was folding Marcus's clothes when David called, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "Turn on Channel 7, right now." Camille grabbed the remote, and there was Brent Halverson, flanked by his lawyers and union representatives, standing on the courthouse steps in a crisp uniform that probably cost more than Marcus's funeral. His jaw was set in what was meant to look like righteous determination, but came across as arrogance. "I stand by my actions on the night of October 5th. Halverson said, reading from a prepared statement. "I gave Mr. Reigns multiple opportunities to comply. When he reached toward his waistband, I had milliseconds to make a decision that could mean life or death, mine or my partner's. I chose life. Every officer faces this reality. We don't get the luxury of hindsight or slow-motion replay. We have to act on training and instinct." A reporter shouted a question. "What about the civilian footage that shows Mr. Reigns reaching for his wallet, not his waistband?" Halverson's lawyer stepped forward smoothly. "Camera angles can be deceiving, especially at night. What matters is what Officer Halverson perceived in that moment, and his perception was of a threat. The law is clear. An officer's reasonable belief of danger is sufficient justification for the use of deadly force." Camille watched her hand still holding one of Marcus's sweaters and felt something cold and certain settle in her chest. They thought they could spin this, thought they could control the narrative with legal jargon and appeals to officer safety. They had no idea what was coming. Catherine Park called that evening with news that should have been good. "Department of Justice is taking the case. Federal prosecutors are moving forward with civil rights violation charges. It's going to trial Cam." "When?" "Probably 6 months. They'll try to delay, but the media attention is forcing everyone to move faster than usual." 6 months. Half a year of watching Zara wake up crying for her father. Half a year of sleeping in an empty bed. Half a year of Halverson walking free, cashing paychecks, living his life, while Marcus rotted in the ground. "I need you to do something for me," Camille said. "When this goes to trial, I want to testify." "Of course. You're the primary witness." "No, I mean really testify. Not just about what happened that night, about who I am, what I've done, my background." There was a long pause. "Cam, your military record is classified. Ghost 6 doesn't exist on paper. Even if I wanted to introduce that information, I legally can't." "Then declassify it. You know people. Call in favors. Because I'm telling you right now, Catherine, the only way we win this is if that jury understands that I'm not some hysterical widow who misremembered what happened. I'm a trained operative who has documented kills and survived situations that would break most people. When I say I know what I saw, it needs to carry weight. That could backfire. Defense will say you're too trained, too biased, too aggressive. They'll paint you as someone who wanted revenge and is manipulating evidence." "Let them try." Camille's voice was steel. "I'll take that risk." Over the following months, Camille became someone she barely recognized. During the day, she was Zara's mother, attending parent-teacher conferences, helping with homework, maintaining whatever normalcy she could salvage. But at night, after Zara fell asleep, she transformed into Ghost 6 again, coordinating with Catherine, reviewing evidence, preparing for war. The case built slowly, but inexorably. Officer Kim's testimony was corroborated by the civilian footage. The body cam analysis showed clear evidence of tampering. Financial records revealed that Halverson had recently received a bonus for community policing initiatives, a sick irony given his social media history, which Cypher Ghost had thoroughly documented and which Catherine had managed to introduce through independent discovery. But the defense fought back hard. They brought in expert witnesses who talked about the split-second nature of police work. They showed statistics about officers killed in traffic stops. They painted Marcus as physically imposing 6'2", 200 pounds, capable of being a threat even unarmed. "They're dehumanizing him," David said one night after a particularly brutal pre-trial hearing where defense lawyers had questioned whether Marcus had been drinking at Zara's concert. "Making him sound like some kind of monster." "That's their strategy," Camille said. She was at her kitchen table surrounded by documents, a cold cup of coffee at her elbow. "They can't argue the facts, so they argue perception. Make the jury afraid of Marcus in retrospect, and they'll justify Halverson's fear in the moment. How do we fight that? We make Marcus human again. We put his colleagues on the stand, his neighbors, his daughter." She saw David's face change. "Not Zara herself, she's too young, and I won't put her through that. But her teacher, her friends' parents, people who saw Marcus at school events. We build a picture of who he really was." Ruth Marcus's mother had been mostly silent since the funeral, hollowed out by grief. But she found her voice when the defense tried to introduce Marcus's juvenile record, a shoplifting charge from when he was 15, dismissed after community service. "My son made a mistake when he was a child," Ruth told the media, her voice shaking, but clear. "He stole a candy bar because he was hungry and too proud to ask for help. He learned from it, did his service, and never broke the law again. He became an engineer, a father, a man who paid his taxes and volunteered at the food bank where he'd once needed help. And they're going to use a 30-year-old candy bar to justify murdering him. What kind of justice is that?" The clip went viral. Suddenly more people were paying attention. Civil rights groups offered support. Other families who'd lost loved ones to police violence reached out. The movement Camille hadn't meant to start was growing beyond her control, and that was exactly what she needed. The trial began on a cold Monday in April, 6 months after Marcus had died. The courthouse was packed with supporters, protesters, media. Camille walked through them all wearing a navy suit, her hair pulled back, her face carefully neutral. Beside her, Zara held her hand wearing the same dress she'd worn to her father's funeral. Inside the courtroom, Camille finally saw Halverson up close. He sat at the defense table in his uniform shoulders, back jaw set. When their eyes met, she saw him assess her middle-aged black woman, grieving widow, manageable threat. She watched him dismiss her. Good. Let him. The prosecution's opening statement was solid. They laid out the timeline, showed the civilian footage, explained how Halverson's story didn't match reality. Marcus had complied with every command. He'd reached for his documents, not a weapon. The shooting was unjustified, unprovoked, and driven by racial bias that Halverson had documented himself through years of social media posts. The defense's opening was equally predictable. They showed photos of officers killed in the line of duty, played 911 calls from traffic stops that had turned violent, brought in Halverson's commendations, his years of service, his family, a wife, and 2 daughters, who sat in the front row looking appropriately distressed. "Officer Brent Halverson is a hero," his lawyer said, voice ringing with conviction. "A man who puts his life on the line every single day to keep our communities safe. On the night of October 5th, he made a decision that no officer wants to make. But it was the right decision based on his training and the threat he perceived. This is not a murder trial. This is a trial of a system that asks impossible things of the men and women who protect us and then punishes them for doing their jobs." Camille sat through the first week of testimony with her hands folded, her face composed. She listened to experts drone on about police protocol and reasonable force. Watched the defense try to poke holes in Officer Kim's testimony, suggesting he was lying to save his career. Saw them attempt to discredit the civilian footage by bringing in their own technical experts who claimed the angle was distorted. Then it was time for Camille to take the stand. She walked to the witness box in a gray suit that Marcus had bought her for their anniversary, the last gift he'd ever given her. As she was sworn in, she caught Zara's eye in the gallery. Her daughter gave her a small nod. "You can do this." Mom and Camille felt her resolve harden into something unbreakable. The prosecutor, James Chen, started gently. Mrs. Reigns, can you tell us about the night of October 5th? My husband and I were driving home from our daughter's school concert. Camille said, her voice steady and clear. We were pulled over by Officer Halverson at approximately 11:43 p.m. He stated our taillight was out. He asked my husband to exit the vehicle. My husband complied with every instruction given. When he reached for his license and registration, Officer Halverson shot him twice in the chest. My husband died in my arms at 11:47 p.m. Mrs. Reigns, the defense has suggested that in the darkness, in the stress of the moment, you may have misremembered what you saw. How confident are you in your recollection? This was it, the opening she needed. I'm absolutely certain of what I saw, Camille said. I'm trained to observe and remember details under extreme stress. It's what I've done for 15 years. Chen paused, giving the moment weight. Can you explain what you mean by that? I served in the United States Army from 2005 to 2020. My official record shows me as a logistics officer and later as a defense contractor consultant. That's partially true. What's also true, and what has recently been declassified for the purposes of this trial, is that I was recruited into a special operations unit with the designation Ghost 6. The courtroom erupted. Reporters started texting. The judge banged his gavel. Halverson's face went from smug to confused, and Camille just sat there calm, waiting for order to be restored. Chen continued once the room settled. Can you describe what Ghost 6 was? Ghost 6 was my operational call sign within Delta Force. I was part of a classified unit that conducted high-risk missions in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen, and other locations I'm still not authorized to name. My role included reconnaissance, target elimination, hostage rescue, and intelligence gathering in hostile territory. And in that capacity, you were trained in what exactly? Observation, threat assessment, weapons handling, combat medicine, survival under duress. I was trained to make life or death decisions in milliseconds, often with incomplete information and under fire. I've been shot at by actual enemy combatants. I've survived IED attacks. I've been captured, tortured, and escaped. I know what a real threat looks like, Mr. Chen. And my husband reaching for his wallet was not it. The defense attorney was on his feet. Objection. This is irrelevant and prejudicial. Mrs. Reigns' military background has no bearing on what happened that night. On the contrary, Your Honor, Chen said smoothly. The defense has spent considerable time suggesting that Mrs. Reigns is an unreliable witness due to stress and grief. Her background directly refutes that argument. If anyone in this courtroom is qualified to accurately assess a threatening situation, it's the woman who served multiple combat tours in special operations. The judge considered. I'll allow it, but keep it relevant, Mr. Chen. Chen turned back to Camille. Mrs. Reigns, in your professional opinion, based on your extensive military training and experience, was Officer Halverson in danger when he shot your husband? No. My husband's hands were visible. His movements were slow and deliberate. He was speaking calmly, explaining his actions. Officer Halverson positioned himself at a distance that gave him tactical advantage and clear sightlines. There was no threat. This wasn't a split-second decision made under fire. This was execution. Objection. Sustained. Mrs. Reigns, please stick to what you observed. What I observed, Camille said, turning to face the jury directly, was an officer who escalated a routine traffic stop into a fatal encounter, who gave contradictory commands designed to create confusion, who kept his hand on his weapon before my husband even stepped out of the vehicle. I've seen combat, and I've seen murder. What happened to my husband was murder. The defense attorney, Michael Brennan, no relation to Detective Sarah Brennan, stood for cross-examination with visible confidence. He'd clearly been preparing for this. Mrs. Reigns, this Delta Force story is quite dramatic. Can you provide documentation of your service? Most of my service record is still classified. What has been declassified for this trial has been provided to the court. How convenient. So we're just supposed to take your word that you're some kind of super soldier. My service is a matter of record, counselor. Whether you choose to believe it is irrelevant to what happened to my husband. Brennan switched tactics. Let's talk about your training. You mentioned target elimination. That's a euphemism for killing people, isn't it? In combat situations, yes. How many people have you killed, Mrs. Reigns? Chen objected, but the judge allowed it. Camille took a breath. 17 confirmed, possibly more that weren't confirmed. She heard the gasp ripple through the courtroom. Saw Halverson lean forward, interested now. Brennan smiled. 17 people. And you're testifying about the appropriate use of force. Those were enemy combatants in war zones who posed active threats to American lives. My husband was an unarmed civilian reaching for his wallet on a Virginia highway. If you can't see the difference, counselor, that says more about you than me. But you're familiar with violence. Comfortable with it even. Isn't it possible that your perception of what constitutes a threat is skewed by your background? That you're more aggressive, more paranoid than the average person? My training taught me to be less reactive, not more. To assess before acting. To de-escalate whenever possible. Every kill I made was necessary, justified, and documented. Can Officer Halverson say the same? Brennan's jaw tightened. You've had months to prepare this testimony, months to craft a narrative, months to manipulate evidence. Isn't it true that your military background would make you particularly skilled at deception? My military background makes me particularly skilled at recognizing it, and I recognize it now in every word Officer Halverson has said about that night. You're angry, aren't you? Mrs. Reigns angry that your husband is dead. Angry at the police. Angry enough to lie under oath if it means getting revenge. Camille's voice dropped, became quiet and deadly. I'm angry that my daughter's father was murdered for being black in America. I'm angry that the man who killed him is sitting in this courtroom in uniform, protected by a system that values his fear over my husband's life. I'm angry that you're standing here trying to make me the villain, when your client shot an unarmed man twice in the chest and then lied about it. So yes, counselor, I'm angry, but I'm not lying. Every word I've said is the truth. The silence that followed was absolute. Camille held Brennan's gaze until he looked away. When she stepped down from the witness stand 3 hours later, having answered every question with precision and control, she saw the shift in the jury's faces. They weren't seeing a grieving widow anymore. They were seeing a warrior who had survived war only to lose her husband to a corrupt system at home. The prosecution rested its case the next day. The defense, realizing their strategy was failing, made a desperate move. They put Halverson on the stand. Camille watched from the gallery as he was sworn in. He looked confident, still probably thinking his uniform and his lawyers would protect him. He answered questions about his training, his experience, his version of that night. He described Marcus as large, aggressive, non-compliant. He talked about the fear he'd felt, the split-second decision, the weight of knowing he might not go home to his family. It was a good performance, practiced, sympathetic. Then came cross-examination. Chen pulled up Halverson's social media posts on the courtroom monitors. Each one appeared larger than life. Racist memes, violent rhetoric, comments about urban thugs, and making them kneel. Officer Halverson, did you write this post? When they reach you, shoot. Let the lawyers sort it out later. Halverson's lawyer objected, but the judge overruled. Halverson shifted in his seat. That was taken out of context. It was about officer safety. Yes or no? Did you write it? Yes, but... And this one. Some people only understand force. Give them what they understand. That's about dealing with criminals. Did you write it? Yes. Chen pulled up the psychological evaluation. In 2018, your department psychologist recommended counseling for, quote, aggressive tendencies and potential bias in community interactions. Did you receive that counseling? I don't recall. The records show you didn't. In fact, you filed a grievance against the psychologist claiming the evaluation was unfair. Is that correct?" Halverson's face was reddening. She didn't understand the realities of police work. What she understood was that you were a danger to the community. And she was right, wasn't she? Because 6 years later, you killed an unarmed man who was doing exactly what you told him to do. He reached for his wallet. "We have Video Officer Halverson, clear, unedited civilian video that shows Marcus Reigns reaching for the documents you asked to see. Documents he was holding when you first approached. Documents that fell when you ordered him out of the vehicle with his hands up. You gave him contradictory commands, and when he tried to comply with both, you killed him. I feared for my life." "Did you?" Chen's voice cut like a blade. "Because the video shows something interesting. After you shot Mr. Reigns, after he fell, after his wife was screaming and bleeding and holding her dying husband, you know what you did? You smiled. Just for a second, but the camera caught it. You smiled." The courtroom was silent. Halverson's face had gone from red to white. That's not, I didn't." Chen played the footage, zoomed in on Halverson's face in the seconds after the shooting, and there it was, undeniable, the slight upturn of his lips. Satisfaction. "You didn't fear for your life, Officer Halverson. You looked at Marcus Reigns and saw combat, but not the kind Mrs. Reigns knows. You saw a black man who you thought wouldn't fight back, who you could put down without consequence. You didn't shoot out of fear. You shot out of arrogance." Objection. But the damage was done. The jury had seen it. The gallery had seen it. And Halverson, sitting in the witness box, had no answer. When the defense rested, when both sides had made their closing arguments, Camille sat in the courthouse corridor waiting for the verdict. It took the jury 4 hours. They filed back in with faces that gave nothing away. Camille held Zara's hand on one side, Ruth's on the other. David stood behind them, his hand on Camille's shoulder. The foreman stood. "On the charge of deprivation of rights under color of law resulting in death, we find the defendant Brent Halverson guilty." The courtroom exploded. Shouts of joy, cries of relief, media scrambling. Camille heard it all from a distance through a fog that made everything feel unreal. She looked at Halverson, saw him crumble as the bailiffs approached with handcuffs. She watched them cuff him, watched them lead him away, watched his family sob in the front row. And she felt nothing. No satisfaction, no joy. Just an emptiness where Marcus should have been. "Mom." Zara was looking up at her, tears streaming down her face. "We won." "Yeah, baby," Camille said, pulling her daughter close. "We won." But as they left the courthouse that evening, pushing through reporters and supporters, Camille knew this wasn't over. Halverson would appeal. The department would close ranks. The system would try to protect itself. She'd won this battle. But the war, the real war against the corruption and racism and violence that had killed Marcus, that was just beginning, and Ghost 6 was ready. The media circus that followed the verdict was exactly what Camille had expected, and exactly what she'd dreaded. Their house became a pilgrimage site for journalists, activists, and strangers who wanted to touch the woman who'd brought down a corrupt cop. She stopped answering the door after the third day, stopped reading the news after a week. The victory everyone kept congratulating her on felt hollow when she still woke up in an empty bed, when Zara still set the table for 3 people out of habit. Halverson's sentencing was scheduled for 3 weeks after the verdict. 21 days of his family's lawyers filing motion after motion, trying to delay the inevitable. 21 days of Camille watching the Fairfax County Police Department close ranks, issue statements about a few bad apples, while doing absolutely nothing to address the systemic rot that had enabled Halverson in the first place. Lieutenant Morris retired quietly with full pension. The union president went on television calling the verdict a miscarriage of justice that puts every officer at risk. 3 officers who'd testified for the prosecution, including Kim, were transferred to desk duty, effectively ending their careers on the street. The system was protecting itself just as Camille had known it would. She was sitting at her kitchen table reading yet another article about both sides of the police reform debate when her phone rang. Unknown number, but the area code was DC. Mrs. Reigns, this is Congresswoman Diana Okafor's office. The Congresswoman would like to speak with you about testifying before the House Committee on Oversight and Reform. Camille sat up straighter. Okafor was chair of the committee, a former civil rights attorney who'd made police accountability her signature issue. Testifying about what? About your husband's case. About the broader pattern of police violence and systemic failures in accountability. The Congresswoman believes your story and your unique background could be instrumental in pushing for federal legislation. When? We'd need you in Washington in 2 weeks. I know that's short notice. I'll be there. After she hung up, Camille sat in the silence of her kitchen and felt something shift. The case against Halverson was over won. But the fight Marcus had died for, the fight against a system that treated black lives as disposable, that fight had only just begun. That night she told Zara over dinner. Her daughter had started eating again, slowly returning to the world of the living. She'd even smiled yesterday when her best friend Sarah had come over, though the smile still didn't quite reach her eyes. I need to go to Washington for a few days, Camille said, pushing pasta around her plate. To talk to Congress about what happened to Dad. Zara looked up, fork suspended. Like on TV, in that big room with all the important people. Exactly like that. Will it help? Will it make them change things? Camille chose her words carefully. I don't know if it'll change things, baby, but I know that staying silent definitely won't. Your dad deserves better than silence. Can I come? The question caught Camille off guard. It's going to be intense. Lots of questions, probably some hostile people. I don't want you to have to. I want to be there. Zara's voice was firm, more adult than any 12-year-old should sound. Daddy would want me to be brave, to see this through. Camille reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. Okay, we'll go together. The sentencing hearing came first. Camille walked into the courthouse on a gray Monday morning to find it even more packed than during the trial. Halverson sat at the defense table in civilian clothes, now no more uniform, no more badge. Just a man who'd killed someone and been caught. The judge, a black woman named Alicia Thompson, who'd presided with firm fairness throughout the trial, looked down at Halverson with something that might have been pity or might have been contempt. It was hard to tell. Mr. Halverson, you've been found guilty of deprivation of rights under color of law, resulting in death. Before I pronounce sentence, does the defense wish to make a statement? Halverson's lawyer stood. Your Honor, my client has served this community with distinction for 15 years. He's a decorated officer, a family man, someone who's put his life on the line countless times. What happened that night was a tragic mistake, but it was made in good faith in the course of doing an impossible job. We ask the court to consider. I've considered everything, counselor. Sit down. Judge Thompson turned to Camille. Mrs. Reigns, you have the right to make a victim impact statement. Do you wish to do so? Camille stood. She'd written something the night before sitting at Marcus's desk in his old office that still smelled like his cologne. But standing here now, looking at Halverson's blank face, she knew the prepared words wouldn't be enough. Your Honor, I've spent the last 7 months trying to understand what happened to my husband, trying to make sense of how a man could be killed for being polite, for complying, for existing while black. And the thing I keep coming back to is this: Officer Halverson had a choice. When he saw my husband that night, he had a choice about what to see. He could have seen a man coming home from his daughter's concert, a father, a husband, a human being. Instead, he saw a threat. And that choice, that decision to see threat instead of humanity, that's what killed Marcus. She turned to face Halverson directly. You looked at my husband and saw combat. But you've never been to war. I have. I know what real combat looks like, what real threats are. And I'm telling you, standing here as someone who survived firefights and IED attacks and torture, you weren't afraid that night. You were comfortable. comfortable with the power you held, comfortable knowing the system would protect you. You shot my husband because you thought you could get away with it." Halverson's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. "My daughter will grow up without her father," Camille continued. "She'll never have him walk her down the aisle, never introduce him to her children, never hear his laugh or his terrible dad jokes again. You took that from her. You took everything from our family. And for what? Because you were having a bad night, because you saw a black man and decided he deserved to die. There's no sentence that can balance that scale. No number of years that can give me back my husband or give my daughter back her father. But I pray that you spend every day of whatever sentence you receive thinking about the life you destroyed. Not just Marcus's life, mine, my daughter's, your own family's. Because that's what violence does. It destroys everything it touches." She sat down. Ruth squeezed her hand. Zara leaned against her shoulder. Judge Thompson looked at Halverson. "Does the defendant wish to make a statement?" Halverson stood slowly. His lawyer tried to stop him, but he waved him off. "I did my job that night. Everything I did was by the book according to my training. If the system failed, it wasn't my fault. I was just trying to go home to my family." The courtroom went silent. Even his own lawyer looked shocked at the tone deafness of his words. Judge Thompson's face hardened. "You were just trying to go home to your family. Mr. Reigns was trying to do the same thing. The difference is, he actually was going home until you killed him. You showed no remorse during this trial. You've shown none now. You've blamed everyone but yourself. You're training the system, even Mr. Reigns, for having the audacity to comply with your contradictory commands. I've been on this bench for 23 years, and I've seen a lot of defendants. But rarely have I seen someone so utterly convinced of their own righteousness while standing convicted of murder." She paused, letting the words settle. "The federal sentencing guidelines for your crime allow for up to life imprisonment. Given the circumstances of this case, the clear evidence of bias, the attempt to cover up your actions, your complete lack of remorse, I'm sentencing you to 40 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Bailiff, take him into custody." Halverson's face went white. His family erupted in sobs, and as the bailiffs led him away in handcuffs, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions, Camille felt that same strange emptiness. Justice had been served. The bad guy was going to prison. But Marcus was still dead. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. Some held signs supporting Halverson, Blue Lives Matter. He was just doing his job. Others held photos of Marcus, of other victims of police violence, of the long list of names that America kept refusing to remember. A reporter shoved a microphone in Camille's face. "Mrs. Reigns, how do you feel about the sentence?" "I feel like we got justice in this one case. But there are thousands of other cases where families are still waiting, where officers are still on the street, where the system is still protecting killers with badges. What's next for you?" "I'm going to make sure this never happens to another family." The reporter pressed. "Are you calling for police reform?" "I'm calling for accountability. Real accountability, not internal investigations that clear officers 99% of the time. Not paid leave that's just a vacation. Not the blue wall of silence that protects bad cops at the expense of good ones." She looked directly into the camera. "To every officer out there who stood by while their partner used excessive force, who's lied in reports to cover up misconduct, who's valued the brotherhood over the truth, your silence is complicity. And it ends now." The clip went viral within hours. By that evening, it had been viewed 10 million times. By the next morning, Congresswoman Okafor's office was calling again. "That speech outside the courthouse, we need you to say that under oath. Can you be in D.C. by Thursday?" "I'll be there Wednesday." Camille spent the next 3 days preparing. She'd thought the trial had been thorough, but Catherine Park's briefing materials for the congressional testimony were something else entirely. Maps showing patterns of police violence across the country. Statistical analyses of charging decisions. case files of officers who'd killed multiple people and faced no consequences. It was overwhelming in its scope, devastating in its consistency. "The committee is going to ask you about solutions," Catherine said during their prep session in a DC hotel room. "They'll want policy recommendations, legislative frameworks. Are you ready for that?" "I'm not a policy expert, Kat. I'm a widow who wants answers." "You're more than that now. Whether you wanted it or not, you're the face of this movement. Your story, your background, your victory, it's given hope to thousands of families. They're going to listen to you in a way they haven't listened to others." Camille looked at the map spread across the hotel bed. Red dots marked cities where police killings had occurred. There were hundreds of them, too many to count. "What do they want me to say?" "The truth, just like you did in court." The morning of the hearing, Camille dressed carefully. Navy suit again, the armor of credibility. She braided Zara's hair, kissed her daughter's forehead, and tried not to think about how Marcus should be here for this. The hearing room was massive, wood-paneled, and intimidating. Congresswoman Okafor sat in the center of the panel, flanked by a dozen other representatives. Some looked sympathetic, some looked hostile. All looked powerful in a way that would have intimidated the old Camille, the one who'd existed before Marcus died. Ghost 6 didn't intimidate easily. "Mrs. Reigns, thank you for being here," Okafor began once Camille had been sworn in. "I know this is difficult, revisiting your husband's death, but your testimony today could help prevent other families from experiencing what you've gone through." "I hope so, Congresswoman. Can you walk us through what happened the night your husband was killed?" Camille did, calmly and clearly. She'd told the story so many times now that it had taken on a rehearsed quality, the edges of her grief worn smooth by repetition. But the facts remained sharp: the traffic stop, the contradictory commands, the shots, Marcus dying in her arms. When she finished, a representative from Texas, a white man in his 60s with a flag pin on his lapel, leaned forward. "Mrs. Reigns, I'm very sorry for your loss. But isn't it true that police officers face split-second life-or-death decisions every day? That we can't judge their actions from the comfort of a hearing room?" "With respect, Congressman, that's exactly what we should do. Judge their actions, hold them accountable. Because if we don't, if we just accept that officers can kill people and claim fear, then no one is safe. Not black men like my husband. Not Latino teenagers, not disabled individuals, not anyone who might be perceived as a threat by someone with a badge and a gun. But surely you understand that police work is inherently dangerous." "I understand danger, Congressman. I've been in danger professionally for 15 years. And you know what my rules of engagement were. I couldn't fire unless I had positive identification of a threat. Unless I was taking active fire or saw a weapon being aimed at me or my team. If I'd killed an unarmed civilian reaching for identification, I'd have been court-martialed and imprisoned. Why do police officers on American streets have looser rules of engagement than soldiers in war zones?" The question hung in the air. Another representative, a black woman from Georgia, spoke up. "Mrs. Reigns, in your research and preparation for this testimony, have you found evidence that what happened to your husband was part of a pattern?" This was it, the opening Camille had been waiting for. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a map, unfolding it across the witness table. It was covered in red circles, 24 of them, each one marking a city where an unarmed black person had been killed by police in the last 2 years. Next to each circle was a name and a date. "This is just 2 years, Congresswoman. Just the cases that made the news. Philando Castile, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Daunte Wright, Adam Toledo, Ma'Khia Bryant, Patrick Lyoya, Jayland Walker, Tyre Nichols, Jordan Neely." She pointed to each red circle as she spoke. "These are the ones we know about. But for every case that makes headlines, there are dozens that don't. Traffic stops that end in death. Wellness checks that end in shootings. Arrests for minor crimes that end in chokeholds." She looked up at the panel. "My husband isn't an isolated incident. He's a statistic in a pattern of violence that this country refuses to acknowledge. Black people are 3 times more likely to be killed by police than white people. We're more likely to be unarmed when killed, more likely to have those killings ruled justified. And the officers who kill us, they're almost never held accountable. Officer Halverson is the exception, not the rule. And he's only in prison because I had resources. Most families don't have military connections. Media attention. A case so clear-cut, even the system couldn't ignore it. The Texas congressman tried again. Mrs. Reigns, aren't you painting with an overly broad brush? There are hundreds of thousands of police officers in this country, and the vast majority are good people doing a hard job. Then where were those good people when Officer Halverson was posting racist content online? Where were they when his psychological evaluation recommended counseling and he refused? Where were they when he had 3 excessive force complaints? Good cops who stay silent aren't good cops. Congressman, they're accomplices. Okafor stepped in. Mrs. Reigns, if you could make one change to policing in America, what would it be? Camille took a breath. This was the moment Catherine had warned her about, the moment where she needed to be careful, diplomatic, strategic. She decided to be honest instead. I'm not asking for new laws, Congresswoman. We have plenty of laws against murder. What I'm asking for is presence. Real presence, not just lip service. I want officers who kill people to be charged at the same rate as civilians who kill people. I want internal affairs investigations to be conducted by external bodies with real oversight. I want qualified immunity to end so officers face consequences for their actions. I want body cameras that can't be turned off or edited. I want community review boards with actual power, not just advisory roles. I want police unions to stop protecting violent officers at the expense of public safety. She paused, meeting the eyes of each representative. But more than any of that, I want acknowledgement. I want this country to stop pretending that police violence is a problem with a few bad apples, and admit it's a systemic issue that requires systemic solutions. Because right now, we're asking Black families to keep sacrificing their sons and daughters and husbands and fathers to a system that doesn't value their lives. And that's not justice. That's not order. That's state-sanctioned violence. The room was silent. Camille could see her words landing differently on different faces, some shocked, some approving, some openly hostile. Silence isn't peace, she said quietly. It's complicity. Every representative sitting on this panel has a choice. You can acknowledge the problem and work toward solutions, or you can maintain the status quo and accept that more families will bury their loved ones while officers walk free. What happened to my husband should never happen again, but it will unless you do something about it. The hearing lasted another 3 hours. Representatives asked questions, sometimes sympathetic, sometimes antagonistic. Camille answered all of them with the same calm precision she'd learned in military briefings. When it finally ended, she felt hollowed out, wrung dry. Outside, Zara was waiting with Ruth and David. Her daughter looked up at her with something like awe. "Mom, you were amazing." "I just told the truth, baby." "You made them listen." "Maybe. We'll see if they actually do anything about it." That night back in the hotel room, Camille watched the news coverage. The hearing had dominated the news cycle. Clips of her testimony were playing on loop. Legal experts debated her proposals. Politicians from both parties issued statements, some supportive, some defensive, all carefully calculated. Her phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. "You did it. Real legislation is moving. 3 senators are co-sponsoring a bill based on your testimony. This is huge." Another text, this one from Officer Kim. "Thank you for saying what needed to be said. I resigned today. Can't be part of the system anymore, but I'm going to testify wherever needed. Time to do the right thing." And finally, one from Cypher Ghost. "You started a war G6. People are organizing. Cities are reviewing old cases. You made them afraid. Good." Camille set down her phone and went to check on Zara, who was sleeping in the adjoining room. Her daughter looked peaceful for the first time in months. Still young enough to believe that telling the truth actually mattered, that justice could be won through testimony and evidence and righteous anger. Camille hoped she was right. but she'd seen too much of the world to trust hope alone. She went back to her room and opened her laptop, started composing an email to every civil rights organization she could find. Every family who'd lost someone to police violence. Every activist who'd been fighting this fight long before Marcus died. The subject line was simple: we need to organize. Because Halverson was in prison, yes. The hearing had gone well, yes. But the system that had created him, protected him, enabled him, that system was still intact. Still churning out officers who saw communities as war zones and civilians as enemy combatants. Ghost 6 had won the battle. Now it was time to win the war. She typed through the night, crafting a strategy that pulled from everything she'd learned in military operations. Identify the target, systemic police violence. Assess the terrain, political, legal, social. Build alliances. Activists, lawyers, families, sympathetic officers. Execute with precision media campaigns. Legal challenges. Legislative pressure. Public accountability. By the time the sun rose over D.C., Camille had the outline of a movement. Not a hashtag, not a moment, but a sustained, organized effort to dismantle the structures that had killed Marcus and countless others. She titled the document, The Widow General Doctrine, a name that Cypher Ghost had jokingly called her in a message. It felt right. The widow who became a general. The grieving wife who declared war on injustice. When Zara woke up, she found her mother at the desk, surrounded by papers and empty coffee cups. "Did you sleep at all?" Zara asked. "Couldn't. Too much to do." "What are you working on?" Camille looked at her daughter. Marcus's eyes, Marcus's strength, Marcus's future. "I'm making sure your dad didn't die for nothing." Zara came to stand beside her, looking at the plans spread across the desk. "Is it going to work?" "I don't know," Camille admitted. "But I'm going to try. We're going to try. If you want to be part of it, you don't have to baby. You can just be a kid. Focus on school, on healing." "Dad would want me to fight," Zara said firmly. "I'm in." Camille pulled her daughter close, feeling the weight of everything they'd lost and everything they still had to do. But for the first time since Marcus died, she felt something other than grief. She felt purpose. And purpose, she'd learned in war, was sometimes the only thing that kept you alive. The Widow General Doctrine spread faster than Camille had anticipated. Within 2 weeks of posting it online, civil rights organizations across the country had adopted its framework. Within a month, families of police violence victims were using it to coordinate their cases, share resources, and apply collective pressure on departments that had spent decades burying complaints. Within 3 months, the movement had a name that stuck, spreading across social media platforms and organizing rallies in 37 cities. Camille watched it grow from her kitchen table, still surrounded by the ghosts of her old life. Marcus's coffee mug that she couldn't bring herself to put away, his reading glasses on the counter, his jacket still hanging by the door. Zara had gone back to school, but she came home every day and immediately joined her mother at the laptop, tracking cases, connecting families, building databases of officers with multiple complaints. "Mom, look at this," Zara said one afternoon, turning her screen toward Camille. "Minneapolis just reopened 14 cases based on the documentation protocol you wrote. 14 families are getting new investigations." It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like confirmation of something Camille already knew: the system had been broken all along, protecting the guilty while the innocent stayed buried. "That's good, baby," Camille said, but her voice was flat. 7 months since Marcus died, and she still couldn't feel anything approaching joy. Satisfaction, maybe. Grim purpose, but not joy. Ruth noticed during one of her visits, bringing groceries that Camille kept forgetting to buy. "You're working yourself to death," Marcus's mother said, putting away milk and eggs, while Camille compiled evidence for a case in Baltimore. "When's the last time you slept more than 4 hours?" "I sleep enough." "That's not what I asked." Ruth sat down across from her, hands folded. "Marcus would want you to take care of yourself. Marcus would want me to make sure this never happens to another family." He'd want both. Ruth reached across the table, touching Camille's hand. I know you think you have to carry this alone. That being Ghost 6 means you don't get to be human. But baby, you're allowed to rest, to grieve, to be more than anger and purpose. Camille pulled her hand back gently. I can't, Ruth. If I let myself actually feel everything I've lost, I won't be able to get back up. So you just keep running, keep fighting until what? Until every bad cop is in prison, until the whole system is fixed. That could take the rest of your life, Cam. Then that's what it takes. Ruth looked at her daughter-in-law with something between pity and understanding. Marcus loved you because you were fierce, but he also loved that you could laugh, could dance in the kitchen while cooking could be soft. Don't let them take that from you too. Don't let Halverson kill both of you. The words sat heavy in the quiet kitchen. From upstairs came the sound of Zara practicing violin, the same Vivaldi piece she'd played the night Marcus died, which she'd refused to touch for months until last week when she'd suddenly defiantly started again. Before Camille could respond, her phone rang. Catherine Park, calling at 9 p.m., which meant something was happening. Turn on the news, Catherine said without preamble. Channel 4. Camille grabbed the remote, switching on the television. A breaking news banner scrolled across the bottom. Exclusive Fairfax County Police corruption investigation expands. The anchor was speaking rapidly. In a stunning development tonight, federal investigators have arrested Lieutenant Frank Morris, the officer who oversaw the internal investigation into the Marcus Reigns shooting on charges of obstruction of justice and evidence tampering. Sources tell us this arrest is part of a broader investigation into corruption within the Fairfax County Police Department, with multiple officers implicated in a pattern of falsifying reports and destroying evidence in excessive force cases. Camille watched as footage played of Morris being led from the police station in handcuffs. His face gray, his shoulders slumped. Behind him, 2 other officers she recognized from the station followed, similarly cuffed. 3 more officers were arrested tonight, the anchor continued. Among them is Detective Sarah Brennan, who conducted the initial investigation into Mr. Reigns' death and has now been charged with conspiracy to obstruct justice. Federal prosecutors say this investigation began with the Reigns case, but has uncovered evidence of systematic corruption dating back at least a decade. Catherine's voice came through the phone. We found the original body cam footage, the unedited version. Morris had kept a copy, probably as insurance in case the department tried to throw him under the bus. When we arrested him, he gave it up, hoping for a deal. Will you give him one? Maybe reduced charges, but he's still going to prison, Cam. They all are. Camille felt Zara's hand slip into hers. Her daughter had come downstairs, drawn by the news, and was watching the screen with wide eyes. Does this mean Dad's case helped catch bad cops? Zara asked. Yeah, baby, it does. On screen, the news had cut to footage from Camille's congressional testimony, her words about silence being complicity, playing over images of the arrested officers. Then, a cut to families of other victims speaking about the cases that had been buried by Morris and his team. 15 cases over 10 years. 15 families who might now get justice. This is because of you, Catherine said. Your testimony, your activism, the pressure you put on the system, it forced people to look closer, to investigate what they'd been ignoring. It's because Marcus died, Camille corrected quietly. None of this should have been necessary. No, but it was, and you did it anyway. After they hung up, Camille sat with Zara on the couch, watching the coverage continue. The arrests had triggered a cascade. Cities across the country were now announcing reviews of their internal affairs divisions. The Department of Justice was opening pattern and practice investigations in 6 jurisdictions. 3 police chiefs had resigned. The movement that had started with one widow's grief had become a reckoning. 2 weeks later, Camille received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten in shaky script. Mrs. Reigns, you don't know me, but my son was killed by police in Atlanta 3 years ago. They said he was armed, that he reached for a gun. He wasn't. The case was closed, ruled justified. I thought I'd never get answers. But after your testimony, after the widow general doctrine started spreading, Atlanta reopened his case. They found evidence the officers had planted the gun. Both officers were arrested yesterday. My son's name was Derek. He was 22. He wanted to be a teacher. Thank you for giving me the truth. Thank you for making them see him as human. Janet Morrison. Camille read the letter 3 times before the tears finally came. She'd been holding them back for months, functioning on rage and purpose. But this letter from a mother who'd waited 3 years for justice broke something open inside her. She cried for Marcus, for Derek Morrison, for all the names on her map. Cried for the families still waiting for the children growing up without fathers, for the system that kept failing and failing and failing. Ruth had been right. She couldn't just be anger. She had to let herself be human too. When the tears finally stopped, she felt lighter somehow. Still grieving, still furious, but no longer hollow. She framed Janet Morrison's letter and hung it in her office next to the map with its red circles. A reminder of why the work mattered. The following month brought news that Officer Kim had started a foundation for police accountability funded by his own pension. He was traveling the country speaking at police academies about the blue wall of silence and the cost of complicity. Some departments banned him. Others invited him back for follow-up sessions. Change was slow, but it was happening. Cypher Ghost sent regular updates about the red dot maps that citizens had created tracking police violence in real time. The maps had become a tool for activists, journalists, and concerned citizens to see patterns that individual cases obscured. What looked like isolated incidents became visible as systematic targeting of specific neighborhoods, specific demographics. Camille was invited to speak at universities, at conferences, at town halls. Sometimes she went. More often, she sent video messages, not wanting to leave Zara more than necessary. Her daughter was healing slowly, returning to the girl she'd been before, but she still had nightmares. Still woke up crying for her father. They were learning to live with the loss. Learning that healing wasn't linear. Some days were good. Some days Zara would laugh at something silly, and Camille would hear Marcus's laugh in it and have to leave the room. Some days they'd set the table for 3 out of habit and have to remove the extra plate. Some days they'd make it through without crying. On what would have been Marcus's 45th birthday, Camille took Zara to the cemetery for the first time since the funeral. They'd avoided it, both of them, unable to face the reality of Marcus's body in the ground. But Zara had asked to go, said she wanted to tell her dad about making first-chair violin, about the B+ she'd gotten on her math test after struggling all semester. The cemetery was quiet, autumn leaves falling around them. Marcus's headstone was simple the way he would have wanted it. Just his name, his dates, and the inscription Zara had chosen, the best father in the world. They sat on the grass, Camille on one side of the stone, Zara on the other. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Zara started talking, telling her father about school, about the cases they were working on, about how Mom had testified in front of Congress. Her voice was small but steady, and Camille listened to her daughter find words for the grief she'd been carrying. "I miss you so much, Daddy," Zara said finally. "Every single day. But I'm trying to be brave like you always said. I'm trying to make you proud." Camille spoke, then her voice rough. "We got him, Marcus. Halverson's in prison for 40 years. Morris and his crew are facing charges. The system is finally looking at itself. It's not enough, it'll never be enough because you're still gone, but it's something." She paused, watching a bird land on a nearby headstone. "Zara's right, you know. We're trying to be brave. Trying to turn this into something that matters. I don't know if we're doing it right. I don't know if anything can come from this that justifies losing you. But we're trying." Her voice cracked. "I'm so angry that you're not here. Angry that you died for nothing, for being black and polite and human. Angry that I can't fix this, can't bring you back, can't do anything except fight a system that's so much bigger than me." She looked at the headstone, at the flowers Zara had brought. "But I'm fighting anyway. Because you deserved better. Because every person on my map deserves better. Because I can't..." Her breath hitched. I can't let your death mean nothing. They stayed until the sun started setting, painting the cemetery in orange and gold. As they walked back to the car, Zara slipped her hand into Camille's. Do you think Dad knows? Zara asked. About everything we've done. I think if there's any justice in the universe, he knows. Mom. Zara stopped walking, looking up at her. Are you going to do this forever? The activism, the cases, all of it. Camille considered the question. I don't know, baby. Maybe. Is that okay? Yeah. Zara squeezed her hand. I think it's what Dad would want. For you to keep being Ghost 6, but like for good instead of war. The simplicity of it, the clarity in her daughter's voice made Camille smile for the first time in weeks. Yeah, for good instead of war. As they reached the parking lot, a woman approached them hesitantly. She was young, maybe late 20s, with a little girl holding her hand. The woman's eyes were red like she'd been crying. Mrs. Reigns, I'm sorry to bother you. I saw you on the news during the congressional hearing. She stopped composing herself. My brother was killed by police 2 years ago in Detroit. The case was closed. But after watching you after the Widow General doctrine, we're reopening it. We hired a lawyer. We're fighting back. The little girl tugged on her mother's hand. Mommy, is that the lady from TV? The woman nodded. Yes, sweetheart. The girl looked at Camille with solemn eyes. Are you the one making sure it never happens to my daddy? Camille knelt down to the child's level, her throat tight. I'm trying, sweetheart. I'm trying really hard. Thank you, the little girl said seriously. Then, with the resilience of children, she smiled. I like your daughter's violin case. Does she play good? She plays beautifully, Camille said, glancing at Zara, who was smiling through tears. After the woman and her daughter left, Camille and Zara sat in the car for a moment, processing the encounter. That's going to keep happening, isn't it? Zara asked. People recognizing you, telling you their stories. Probably. Are you okay with that? Camille thought about it. Thought about being Ghost 6, invisible and lethal. Thought about being Camille Reigns, private and protected. Thought about being this new thing, a symbol, a voice, a widow, who became a general. I don't know if I'm okay with it, she admitted, but it's necessary, so I'll do it. She started the car, pulling out of the cemetery parking lot. The sun was setting behind them, casting long shadows across the road. Ahead, the highway stretched toward home, toward the work that never ended, toward a future without Marcus, but somehow impossibly still worth fighting for. Peace without truth isn't peace, Camille said quietly, more to herself than Zara. It's anesthesia. What? Something I said in court. The system wants us to accept platitudes and move on. Healing. Closure. All these words that mean be quiet and stop making noise. But there's no closure when the problem keeps happening. No healing when the wound keeps reopening. Zara was quiet for a moment. Then, so what do? We keep fighting. We keep making noise. We keep making them see that silence isn't peace, it's complicity. They drove home through the Virginia evening past the intersection where Marcus had died. Camille didn't flinch anymore when they passed it. She'd trained herself to look at it directly, to remember to let it fuel her purpose instead of breaking her. Someone had left flowers at the spot, a small memorial with Marcus's photo and a sign that read, Justice for Marcus Reigns. It had been there for months, maintained by people Camille had never met. A reminder that Marcus's death had mattered, that his life had meant something beyond the family who loved him. When they got home, there were 17 new emails waiting. Families asking for help. Activists requesting collaboration, journalists wanting interviews. The work never stopped. But Camille had learned that she couldn't do it alone. She forwarded relevant emails to the network she'd built. Lawyers, activists, former officers who'd found their conscience. The widow general doctrine had become bigger than her, and that was good. It meant the movement would survive, even if she stepped back, even if she needed to focus on being Zara's mother instead of America's conscience. That night, after Zara went to bed, Camille stood in the doorway of Marcus's office. She'd left it exactly as it was, his books on the shelves, his tools organized by size, his coffee mug with the "World's Best Dad" inscription that Zara had given him for Father's Day. "I love you," she said to the empty room. "I'm angry at you for dying, for leaving us, for being so goddamn good that you got yourself killed. But I love you, and I'm going to make sure the world knows what they lost when they lost you." She closed the door gently and went to her own bedroom, where Marcus's pillow still smelled faintly of his shampoo. She held it close and let herself cry again. The good kind of crying that released pressure instead of building it. Tomorrow, she'd wake up and keep fighting. She'd respond to emails, coordinate with activists, prepare for the next congressional hearing. She'd be Ghost 6, the widow general, the woman who'd brought down a corrupt system one case at a time. But tonight, she was just Camille. A woman who'd lost everything and somehow found the strength to keep going. Not for closure, not for peace, but for purpose. Because Halverson was in prison, yes. Morris and his accomplices were facing justice, yes. The system was being forced to examine itself, yes. But the fight wasn't over. Wouldn't be over until every family got the truth they deserved. Until every officer faced real accountability. Until the blue wall of silence crumbled into dust. Camille Reigns had been trained for war, had survived combat zones and covert operations, had earned the codename Ghost 6 through blood and sacrifice. Now she was fighting a different war. Not with bullets and tactical strikes, but with testimony and evidence, and the relentless pursuit of justice. And unlike her military operations, this war had no end date, no extraction plan, no medals waiting at the finish line. Just the slow grinding work of changing a system that didn't want to change. But Camille had learned something in all her years of fighting. The hardest battles were often the most important ones. And she'd never backed down from a fight in her life. She wasn't about to start now. Outside her window, the Virginia night was quiet and dark. Somewhere in that darkness, other families were grieving, other widows were crying, other children were growing up without their fathers. The map in her office had 24 red circles, but Camille knew there were hundreds more, thousands more. A century's worth of pain and injustice that America kept trying to ignore. She couldn't save everyone, couldn't bring Marcus back, couldn't undo the violence that had shattered her world. But she could fight, could speak, could refuse to let the system silence her the way it had silenced so many others. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to change something. To save the next family. To make sure the next father came home from his daughter's concert. That was the hope Camille clung to as she finally fell asleep. Marcus's pillow still clutched in her arms. Not hope for herself, she'd lost that the night he died. But hope for a future where Zara's children wouldn't have to fear traffic stops. Where being black in America didn't carry a death sentence. Where justice was real, not just a word people said at funerals. It was a fragile hope easily broken. But it was all she had. And Ghost 6 had survived on less.